The sun was relentless that afternoon, pressing down on the polished concrete outside the newly completed flight training center at Luke Air Force Base. It was just past 2:30 p.m., and the air shimmered with heat rising from the tarmac. Rows of American flags lined the entryway, snapping gently in the dry breeze. Officers in full-dress blues stood at attention, their medals catching the light. Guests in suits and civilian business attire mingled beneath the canopy of a white event tent, sipping iced drinks and waiting for the ceremony to begin. Near the side entrance, unnoticed by most, Linda Carter was finishing up her rounds. She moved slowly, but with purpose, pushing a mop cart across the concrete, careful not to let the wheels rattle too loud. She wore a faded blue work shirt tucked into loose khaki pants and practical sneakers. Her hair, streaked with gray, was tied back in a no-nonsense bun. Her face was sun-worn and unreadable. She paused, squinting against the sun, as a group of high-ranking officers approached the tent's roped-off VIP path. Linda's mop bucket sat near the corner of that walkway, just a few feet into their intended route. She stepped toward it quickly, trying to move it out of the way before anyone noticed, but someone had already noticed. Colonel Hargrave, the commanding officer of the new center, strode forward, his sunglasses reflecting the sunlight. He stopped short, glaring at her. His voice wasn't raised, but the sharpness in it cut through the air. He asked if she planned to mop her way across every military function, or just the important ones. A few nearby guests chuckled uneasily. She opened her mouth to speak, but he didn't give her the chance. He told her she was here to clean floors, not block the path for actual mission-critical personnel. He said if she wanted to help security, she should start by learning where not to stand. No one spoke. A few junior enlisted looked away. A major coughed and busied herself with her phone. Linda said nothing. She simply nodded once, quietly rolled her cart back 5 feet, and disappeared behind the tent's side flap. The colonel adjusted his sunglasses and walked on, satisfied. Somewhere behind the canvas, the quiet squeak of a mop bucket faded into the background hum of the bass, and no one noticed the way Linda's shoulders stayed square. Not defeated, just steady. Linda Carter had been working at Luke Air Force Base for nearly 7 years. Though most people couldn't say when she started, she just seemed to be there. Quiet, predictable, invisible in the way only someone truly disciplined can be. 58 years old, 5'6", brown hair tied back tight each morning. Her uniform never changed. Blue button-down shirt tucked into sturdy khakis. Plain work shoes. Always clean but never new. She arrived before most of the staff, usually by 5:15 a.m., unlocking the janitor's closet in the rear service wing with the same gentle touch every time. Inside, her cleaning supplies were arranged with near-military precision. Spray bottles in descending size from left to right, fresh cloths folded into even squares, mop head bleached and stored upright. She never had to search for anything. Linda didn't gossip, didn't linger. During breaks, she sat on the far side of the commissary with a battered paperback tucked behind her lunchbox. She packed the same meal every day: 1 hard-boiled egg, a peanut butter sandwich, 1 green apple. The other staff barely noticed. Some assumed she lived alone. Maybe she did. She never corrected the cadets when they called her cleaning queen or Grandma Jet. They didn't mean harm. Not really. Just teasing the way young people do when they think someone isn't important. She never reacted, just gave a small nod or nothing at all, and kept wiping, sweeping, emptying trash bins with the kind of slow, exact motion that suggested not weakness, but restraint. There was a slight limp in her left leg, not enough to call attention. But there, if you watched her walk long enough, she never leaned on anything, never winced. Her eyes were what stood out, though most didn't notice. Hazel, always scanning, not in a nervous way, calculated. She watched people without staring, Watched entrances, exits, patterns. The way a person would if they were used to noticing things before others did. Clipped to her utility belt, just above her keyring, was a worn plastic badge labeled Hangar 7. It was cracked and faded, no longer in use, but she kept it there. Day after day, year after year. No one asked about it, and she never told. The officers didn't see her. The techs barely nodded. Even some of the junior enlisted forgot her name. But she saw everything, and she never missed a single morning. It was 7:45 a.m. when Linda rolled her mop cart toward the edge of the tarmac. The sky already bright and harsh above the flight line. Crews were prepping aircraft for the ceremony. One of the T-6 Texan II trainers sat parked just off the main strip, its cowling open, panels exposed, fueling hose still attached. A couple of ground techs chatted casually by the wheel well. Linda moved without hurry, sweeping debris from the service path nearby. She paused for just a second, then stepped closer, her eyes fixed on a dark smear near the rear of the fuselage. Under the fuel intake valve, it was subtle, but it didn't look right. Not just spilled fuel. It was fresh, trickling in a way that suggested pressure. She walked over to the technician nearest the aircraft. He looked up from his checklist and frowned when he saw her. She kept her voice even polite. She said there might be a small leak. Something didn't look normal. He barely glanced at the spot she pointed to. His voice was casual but sharp at the edges. He told her she was just here to clean, not to inspect aircraft. Said the real work was under control. A young cadet standing nearby smirked. She chimed in before Linda could speak again. Told her to stay in her lane. That aircraft safety wasn't part of the janitorial checklist. Linda didn't argue. She simply gave one of her small, unreadable nods and stepped back, rolling her cart toward the edge of the hangar. The technician watched her go, then glanced back at the fuel line. After a beat, something in his face shifted. He walked over, crouched low, and ran a rag along the base of the connector. It came back wet. He leaned closer. What he saw made his posture stiffen. He didn't call out, didn't wave any flags, just grabbed his radio and requested an immediate inspection. 2 more crew arrived within minutes. Tools came out. The cowling came fully open. Within 10 minutes, the fuel hose was detached, and the aircraft was pulled from rotation for maintenance. No one looked toward the service corridor where Linda had vanished. No one said a word. By 8:10 a.m., the T-6 was rolled back into a shaded bay. Linda stood behind the break room door, sipping from a chipped thermos, her eyes following the movements outside through the dusty glass. She didn't smile. She didn't sigh. She just watched, quiet and steady. Before placing the thermos back in her cart and returning to work, no one thanked her. But the jet didn't fly that morning. The flyover was scheduled for 1100 sharp by 10:57 a.m. The ceremony was in full swing. Rows of officers stood in formation. The color guard, waiting near the main podium, and families shaded their eyes as they looked skyward. The crowd buzzed with excitement. A pair of T-6 Texan II trainers swept into view, banking neatly over the flagpoles before circling back for a second pass. Everything was going according to plan. Then something shifted. One of the T-6 seconds jerked unevenly as it began its turn, not a graceful arc, but a twitch, as if something beneath the surface had slipped. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The plane dipped lower, not by much at first, but enough for trained eyes to notice. On the third pass, the trainee pilot began to lose control. The aircraft wobbled in the air, then nosed down, veering toward the southern edge of the event space. Screams burst from the front row. People scattered, pushing past chairs and flagpoles, tripping over themselves in panic. The speakers crackled but gave no direction. Officers shouted conflicting orders. A child began to cry. Someone dropped their phone and ran without it. The noise built quickly, a roar of fear and confusion. But one voice cut through. Linda Carter stepped out from behind a generator shed with her hands raised, eyes locked on the descending aircraft. Her voice didn't shake. It rang out clear and sharp, louder than it should have been, as if it carried its own authority. She pointed to the far west wall, where a faded maintenance door sat half-hidden behind stacks of unused barricades. West Corridor. Access tunnel. Move now. A group of junior airmen froze for just a second, then followed her hand. Grabbing two civilians by the arms and guiding them toward the door, Linda kept moving, fast and steady. Her stride long and sure. The limp was gone. Her feet hit the pavement with purpose. Her commands came fast. Efficient. Use the west tunnel. Away from the bleachers. Stay low. Don't bunch up. She didn't stop to ask. She didn't check to see who obeyed. She acted. By the time the aircraft made its final arc, nearly 20 people had reached the shelter of the old hangar. Linda waved two more kids through, then turned just as the T-6 righted itself and passed overhead, barely missing the edge of the scaffolding by what looked like inches. Its engine coughed once, then steadied. The plane climbed, banking hard and limping back toward the runway. The chaos was already starting to settle, but eyes were turning toward the woman in the work shirt who had just cleared half the crowd in less than a minute. No badge, no radio, no rank, just that voice, that certainty, that clarity under pressure. She wasn't running from danger. She was moving into it, and people were following. The ceremony never officially resumed. After the T-6 Texan II regained altitude, it circled once, then limped back to base and came down hard on the outer runway. Tires screaming against the asphalt. The landing wasn't graceful, but it was controlled enough to keep the aircraft intact. The emergency crews were still rolling out when Linda Carter was already on the move. She crossed the tarmac with steady, purposeful steps, her janitor's badge swinging lightly against her hip. No one tried to stop her. She moved like someone who belonged near that aircraft. And for reasons they couldn't explain, people got out of her way. She reached the plane before anyone else, her hands already pulling a pair of worn gloves from her back pocket. They slid on smoothly. Practiced. She approached the canopy with her left hand high, signaling calm. The young pilot inside was pale and shaking, his helmet loose from the turbulence, eyes wide with panic. Linda touched the side of the canopy, checked the latches with calm precision, and cracked the seal with a motion so smooth it looked automatic. She pulled it open and helped him unstrap, guiding his movements with quiet, firm instruction. Breathe, ease your leg, hold the rail, not the edge. She braced him under the arm and helped him down herself. A major in the crowd watched, eyebrows drawn. He turned to a colonel beside him and asked if anyone knew who she was. Neither answered. Not yet. Another officer, a senior logistics commander from Davis-Monthan, stepped closer. His eyes narrowed when he saw the patch barely visible on the back of Linda's glove. The old colors had faded, but the shape was distinct. A black boar's head with flared tusks. He blinked and tilted his head. 23rd Fighter Group. He said it quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. Another voice nearby picked it up. Thought she was gone, retired, hurt bad. They said. A young airman whispered her name. Torch. Then someone finally said the full rank, Colonel Linda Carter. The name hung in the air like an echo no one expected to hear again. The whispers spread. Azeche Pilot. Afghanistan. Close air support. Fallujah. Kandahar. The stories came in pieces. She'd flown low and fast over hell to keep ground teams alive. She once stayed on station for nearly 7 hours during an ambush. Took fire. Got hit. Finished the run anyway. They said she'd been pulled out of a wrecked airframe with a shattered pelvis and a collapsed lung. Some said she coded twice on the medevac chopper. After months of recovery, she walked out of rehab and didn't return to the service. No one heard from her again. Until today, People began to piece it together. The limp, the way she'd known the base layout like it was written into her bones, the way she'd moved during the crisis, the way she'd handled that aircraft. Not a janitor. Not just a quiet woman with a mop cart. A veteran pilot, a decorated officer, a leader who had commanded from the cockpit of a warthog, while others crouched under fire, and now, she stood silently by the side of the tarmac, letting the medics finish their check of the pilot she had pulled down to safety. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The people watching now understood what they were looking at. Colonel Carter hadn't disappeared. She just stepped into the background, until the moment called her forward again. The airfield had fallen quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't just happen but settled, slowly. With the weight of something understood too late, Linda Carter stood near the edge of the tarmac, not facing the crowd but watching the medics lead the shaken pilot away. Her gloves were still on, dust smudged into the seams. The faint outline of an old patch just barely visible on the wrist. A breeze tugged gently at the hem of her shirt. The whispers had stopped. No more speculation. Everyone knew now. They knew who she was, what she had done. From somewhere in the middle of the crowd, a figure stepped forward. It was the young cadet who, just hours earlier, had told Linda to stay in her lane. Her face was pale, her jaw tight, but her eyes were steady as she stopped a few feet away. She stood tall, shoulders squared, and lifted her hand in a crisp, formal salute. No words, no explanation, just the act itself. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then another followed, an airman, then a second-year officer, a retired master sergeant, someone in a suit who had once worn the uniform, and then dozens more, in less than a minute. The entire front of the viewing area was filled with upright backs and raised hands. A ripple of silence, deep and heavy, rolled outward across the field. Rows of salutes lined the concrete, from young techs to seasoned veterans, from the command tower balcony to the steps of the hangar. Linda did not move right away. She looked at them slowly, one by one, as if committing each face to memory. She didn't flinch, didn't cry. She just stood in it. Let it come. Let it land. And then, finally, she nodded. Just once. Barely more than a breath. But it was enough. A recognition. "À qui est-on, sir?" In the very back, near the tent where the ceremony had begun. Colonel Hargrave stood frozen. His arms had dropped to his sides. His face was blank, but the color had drained from it. He looked smaller than he had that morning, less sure of himself, less loud. He didn't raise his hand right away, not because he refused, but because he didn't know how to fix what had already been done. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lifted his right hand to his brow, held the salute longer than protocol required. No words, no apology, just a man acknowledging a truth that no longer needed to be said. Linda gave no reaction, but she saw him, and he knew it. There was no music, no orders, no announcement over the speaker, just the sound of the wind brushing past a sea of raised hands, all pointed toward the woman they had once looked past, and now couldn't look away from. When the last salute lowered, and the quiet settled in, Linda Carter stepped away from the tarmac without a word. She didn't linger or look back. She just walked over to the far corner where her mop cart stood, waiting, right where she had left it. Her gloves came off slowly. She tucked them neatly into the side pouch, then reached for her mop like it was any other day. The walkway near the hangar needed attention, dust from the wind, footprints from the crowd. She began wiping it down. Methodical and calm, a young airman passed by, eyes still wide, and glanced at the old key card clipped to her belt. The faded letters read Hangar 7. He asked why she kept it. She didn't stop mopping, just said, quiet and plain. She kept it just in case. The cadet who had once brushed her off stood nearby, shifting awkwardly, Then she stepped forward. Her voice was hesitant but clear. She asked if Linda might ever be open to talking. About close air support. About tactics. Linda paused, looked up. Her face didn't change much, but she gave a small, rare smile. Then she nodded once and kept walking. Mopinhand, toward the hangar in the distance. Some people lead without needing a stage. They don't wear their history on their sleeves or ask for applause. They just do the work. Quietly, steadily, with a kind of strength that doesn't call attention to itself, but never fails to show up when it matters most. Linda Carter reminded everyone of what real leadership looks like. It's not about rank or medals or the sound of your voice in a crowded room. It's about presence, awareness, discipline, the kind that comes from years of showing up, paying attention, and acting with purpose when others wait for permission. There are people like her in every room, every hallway, every base and workplace. People who go unnoticed until something breaks, and they're the ones who step forward. Not because they want to be seen, but because they know what needs to be done. If her story leaves anything behind, maybe it's this. Take another look at the quiet ones, the steady ones, the ones who seem invisible but never miss a thing, because sometimes the person you overlook is the one holding everything together. And true courage rarely makes a sound, but when it does, the whole room listens.